The champagne bubbles in my glass matched the effervescent laughter surrounding me, a stark contrast to the hollowness expanding in my chest. I sat alone at table 19, the dreaded singles table, tucked away in the corner of the lavish ballroom where my cousin Sophia was celebrating her wedding. The white satin tablecloth felt cool under my fidgeting fingertips, a small comfort as I watched couples twirl across the dance floor, their happiness a silent mockery of my solitude. "You can do this, Ellie," I whispered to myself, smoothing down the burgundy bridesmaid dress that had cost me 2 weeks' worth of tips from the diner where I worked. The material clung uncomfortably to my skin in the warm room, a physical reminder of how out of place I felt. 3 months ago, I would have attended with Daniel, my fiancé of 2 years. Now, his absence was a gaping wound, still fresh from his sudden departure. "I'm not ready for this life, Ellie," he had said, packing his things while I stood frozen in our small apartment. "I need someone more ambitious." The diamond ring he'd placed on my finger now sat in a drawer at home, a painful reminder of broken promises. I took another sip of champagne, wincing as the bubbles burned my throat. The wedding band transitioned to a slow song, and couples gravitated toward each other like magnets. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Where are you? Come dance. There are tons of single guys here." I slipped my phone back into my clutch without responding. The last thing I needed was my well-meaning cousin playing matchmaker. The weight of pitying glances from relatives had become unbearable. Poor Ellie, left at the altar. Well, not quite the altar, but close enough for the family gossip mill. The crystal chandelier above cast fractured light across the room, creating shadows that danced along the walls. I focused on the play of light, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. My gaze drifted to the entrance, where a sudden shift in energy caught my attention. 3 men entered the ballroom, and the atmosphere changed instantly. The first 2 were clearly security, broad-shouldered, vigilant, with barely concealed earpieces. But it was the man between them who commanded attention without even trying. Tall and imposing, he wore a tailored black suit that contrasted sharply with the crisp white of his dress shirt. No tie, just the top button left casually undone. A subtle rebellion against formality. His dark hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place, framing features that seemed carved from marble by a sculptor obsessed with creating perfection. His jawline was sharp enough to cut glass, shadowed by the faintest hint of stubble that only emphasized its strength. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Dark as midnight and just as mysterious, scanning the room with calculated precision. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, every step purposeful. I couldn't look away, even as a voice in my head whispered warnings. This man was dangerous, not in the way that spoke of physical violence, though his powerful frame certainly suggested that capacity, but in the way that promised to shatter carefully constructed walls and expose vulnerabilities better left hidden. I forced myself to look down at my half-empty champagne glass, unsettled by my own reaction. The last thing I needed was to be captivated by another man, especially one who screamed trouble from every pore. "Ellie!" My cousin Mia appeared beside me, her bridesmaid dress identical to mine, but somehow looking infinitely better on her petite frame. "Why are you hiding back here? Come dance with us." "I'm just taking a break," I lied, my smile not quite reaching my eyes. "These heels are killing me." Mia's gaze drifted past me, her eyes widening slightly. "Oh my God," she whispered, leaning closer. "Do you know who just walked in?" I shrugged, feigning disinterest despite knowing exactly who she meant. "That's Dante Russo," she hissed, excitement making her voice tremble slightly. "The Dante Russo. What is he doing at Sophia's wedding?" The name triggered a vague recognition. I'd seen it in newspaper headlines, usually accompanied by words like alleged and organized crime. Never convicted, always suspected. The rumors painted him as a modern kingpin, with hands in everything from real estate to nightclubs, all fronts for more sinister enterprises. "I think his family owns the venue," Mia continued, her eyes never leaving him. "They say he never attends events here personally, though. I wonder—" "Mia," someone called from across the room, and she squeezed my arm. "Don't disappear, okay? Promise you'll at least dance once tonight." I nodded. watching her flutter away, grateful for the reprieve from conversation. My momentary peace was shattered when I noticed my ex-fiancé's sister, Vanessa, approaching with determined steps, pulling a tall man behind her. My stomach dropped. I wasn't prepared for this confrontation. "Ellie!" Vanessa's voice carried the false warmth I'd grown to recognize during my time with Daniel. "What a surprise to see you here. Are you alone?" The last word dripped with barely concealed satisfaction. Of course, she knew I was alone. Daniel had probably told his entire family about leaving me. "I'm with the bridal party," I responded, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Oh, that's right. You're Sophia's second cousin, was it?" Her smile never reached her eyes. "This is Marcus. He's a doctor." The man beside her extended his hand, his expression caught between embarrassment and pity. I shook it briefly, already calculating the fastest escape route. "Daniel was so sorry he couldn't make it today," Vanessa continued, twisting the knife deeper. "He's in Milan now, did you know? His new girlfriend's family has connections in the fashion industry. They've been very helpful with his career." Each word was precisely chosen to inflict maximum damage. I felt the heat of humiliation creeping up my neck, threatening to choke me. My eyes burned with unshed tears as I struggled to maintain composure. "I should check if Sophia needs," I began, preparing to stand. "Actually, she's waiting for me," the deep voice came from behind me, smooth as aged whiskey and just as intoxicating. A large hand settled gently on my bare shoulder, warm and steady. I didn't need to turn to know who it belonged to. Somehow, Dante Russo was standing behind my chair, his presence immediately dominating the small space. I apologize for being late, Tesoro. His Italian accent caressed the endearment, making it sound sinfully intimate. He leaned down, his lips close to my ear as he whispered, "Pretend I'm your husband tonight." Before I could process his words, he straightened and extended his hand to Vanessa, whose expression had transformed from smug superiority to stunned disbelief. "Dante Russo," he introduced himself, his tone pleasant, but carrying an undercurrent of authority that made it clear he was accustomed to being obeyed. "Ellie's husband." The lie hung in the air between us, outrageous and impossible. I should have corrected him immediately, should have pulled away from his touch that still burned against my skin. Instead, I found myself frozen, caught in a strange limbo between shock and inexplicable relief. Vanessa's eyes darted between us, clearly trying to reconcile this development with what she thought she knew. Husband? But Daniel said, "Perhaps Daniel doesn't know everything about Ellie's life," Dante interrupted smoothly, his hand moving to the small of my back as he pulled out my chair. "If you'll excuse us, my wife promised me a dance." I rose on unsteady legs, hyper-aware of his hand guiding me, of the subtle scent of his cologne. Sandalwood and something darker, more complex. As he led me away from the table, I caught a glimpse of one of his security men watching us intently, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing?" I finally managed to whisper once we were out of earshot, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dante guided me toward the dance floor, his movements fluid and confident. "Rescuing you, it seems," he replied, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "That woman was trying to humiliate you." "But why would you—" "Let's just say I have a particular distaste for people who prey on vulnerability." His hand tightened slightly on my waist as we reached the edge of the dance floor. Besides, the look on her face was worth the small deception, wasn't it? A reluctant smile tugged at my lips despite my confusion. Vanessa had indeed looked like she'd swallowed something particularly unpleasant. "Now," Dante said, turning to face me fully, "we should make this look convincing." Without warning, he pulled me gently into his arms, one hand settling on the small of my back, the other taking my hand in his. The contact sent a jolt through me, like touching a live wire. Up close, his presence was even more overwhelming, the subtle power in his shoulders, the faint scar that traced his left eyebrow, the impossible depth of his eyes that seemed to see right through my defenses. "I don't even know you," I said, trying to ignore how perfectly I seemed to fit against him. "That's the beauty of pretense, isn't it?" His lips curved into a smile that transformed his severe features, making him look younger, almost boyish. We can be whoever we want for one night. The band played a slow, haunting melody as he guided me across the floor with surprising grace for a man of his size. I was acutely aware of the eyes following us, curious, speculative, envious. For a brief, dizzying moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the fantasy. To be the woman on Dante Russo's arm, desired and protected rather than abandoned and pitied. "Why are you really here?" I asked, needing to ground myself in reality. "At this wedding?" Something flickered in his eyes, caution perhaps. "I own the property. Occasionally I like to make an appearance, ensure everything is running smoothly, and you always rescue random women from uncomfortable social situations." His laugh was unexpected, a rich, warm sound that rumbled through his chest. "Only the intriguing ones." The music shifted, and Dante adjusted seamlessly, pulling me slightly closer. I should have pulled away, should have thanked him for the rescue and returned to my table. Instead, I found myself relaxing into his embrace, allowing the steady rhythm of his movements to lull me into a dangerous comfort. "Your ex was a fool," he said suddenly, his voice carrying a hard edge that hadn't been there before. I stiffened, pulling back slightly to look at him. "How did you—" "I'm observant," he replied simply. And that woman mentioned Daniel. The rest was easy to piece together. Embarrassment flooded through me. Was my heartbreak so obvious, so pathetically transparent that even a stranger could read it? "It's nothing to be ashamed of," Dante continued, as if reading my thoughts. "We've all been betrayed at some point. The question is what we do afterward." Before I could respond, I noticed Daniel's sister watching us intently from across the room, her phone in hand. A chill ran down my spine. "She's taking pictures," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "If Daniel sees—" "Let her," Dante said, his expression hardening. In fact, without warning, he spun me elegantly before dipping me low, his face hovering inches from mine. "Give her something worth photographing." Time seemed to stop as he held me there, suspended in his powerful arms, our faces close enough that I could feel his breath mingling with mine. His eyes asked a silent question, giving me a chance to pull away. I should have. Every logical part of my brain screamed warnings. Instead, caught in a moment of reckless abandon, I nodded almost imperceptibly. His lips found mine with startling gentleness, a stark contrast to the strength evident in every line of his body. The kiss was brief but devastating, sending heat spiraling through me and leaving me breathless when he finally set me upright again. "I think we've made our point," he murmured, satisfaction evident in his tone as he glanced over my shoulder. "Your photographer friend looks positively apoplectic." I couldn't bring myself to look, still reeling from the kiss and the strange electric current that now seemed to flow between us. This was madness. I didn't know this man. This dangerous, powerful man who commanded rooms with his presence and kissed strangers at weddings. "I should go," I said, taking a step back, needing distance to clear my head. "Thank you for the intervention, but I don't think—" "Have dinner with me." It wasn't a question, but neither was it quite a command. "Tomorrow night." "I don't—" "One dinner," he pressed, his gaze intense, "to thank me properly for my gallant rescue." A smile tugged at my lips despite myself. "Is that what it was? What would you call it?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I know getting involved with you would be a mistake." Something darkened in his expression. "You don't know anything about me. I know enough. The whispers, the security men, the aura of controlled danger that surrounded him like a second skin. Men like you are complicated. And you've had enough complications," he finished for me, understanding flickering in his eyes. "Fair enough." He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, offering it to me between two fingers. "When you change your mind, call this number. Directly to me, no intermediaries. I won't change my mind," I said, even as my fingers closed around the heavy cardstock. His smile was knowing, almost predatory. "We'll see." With that, he lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that somehow felt more intimate than the one we'd shared on the dance floor. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, Ellie," he murmured, before turning and walking away, his security falling into step behind him. I stood frozen on the edge of the dance floor, the weight of his card burning in my hand, the ghost of his touch still lingering on my skin. Around me, the wedding continued. Music playing, couples dancing, champagne flowing, but something fundamental had shifted, like the first tremor before an earthquake. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that single, reckless moment when I'd allowed a dangerous man to pull me into his arms, would be the pebble that started an avalanche, burying the life I'd known under its unstoppable force. I slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with dark eyes and whispered promises. When morning came, I found myself staring at Dante's business card on my nightstand. The embossed black text against cream cardstock read simply, Dante Russo, with a phone number beneath. No company name, no title. A man who needed no introduction. I tucked the card into my wallet, telling myself I was only keeping it as a memento of a strange night. A story I could tell someday when the wound of Daniel's betrayal had healed into a scar I could touch without pain. The diner where I worked was busier than usual for a Sunday. I moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling coffee cups and taking orders, grateful for the distraction of mundane tasks. My apartment was too quiet, too full of echoes from a life shared with someone who'd found me lacking. Earth to Ellie. Maria, my fellow waitress, snapped her fingers in front of my face. Table 7's been trying to get your attention for 5 minutes. Sorry, I mumbled, forcing myself back to the present. What's going on with you today? You're a million miles away. I shrugged, unwilling to explain. How could I describe last night? The rescued damsel in distress, and the dangerous man playing knight. It sounded absurd in the harsh light of day. Nothing. Just tired from the wedding. Maria's eyes lit with interest. Oh, right. How was it? Meet any cute guys? The image of Dante's face inches from mine flashed unbidden in my mind. No, I lied. Just the usual wedding stuff. She looked unconvinced, but was distracted by the bell above the door announcing new customers. I turned automatically, coffee pot in hand, and nearly dropped it. 2 men in dark suits entered, their builds and watchful eyes immediately familiar. The security detail from last night. My heart stuttered as I searched for their employer, but they appeared to be alone. They took a booth near the window, and I hesitated, irrationally afraid to approach, yet strangely disappointed that Dante wasn't with them. You want me to take that table? Maria asked, following my gaze. No, I said quickly. I've got it. I smoothed down my apron and crossed the diner, trying to project professional indifference. Up close, I recognized one of them as the man who had been watching Dante and me dance. Good morning, I greeted, placing menus before them. Coffee? The larger of the 2 men studied me with surprising intensity, before nodding. Miss Sullivan, Mr. Russo sends his regards. I nearly fumbled the cups I was setting down. You're here because of me? The second man, leaner but no less intimidating, gave a slight smile. The boss mentioned meeting you last night. Said you worked at a diner. Wasn't hard to find which one. A chill ran down my spine. So you just tracked me down? We were in the neighborhood, the first man said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. Coffee, black, and whatever breakfast special you recommend. I took their orders mechanically, mind racing. They were here watching me, reporting back to Dante. The thought should have terrified me, should have sent me running for the phone to call the police. Instead, I felt a perverse thrill, a forbidden excitement at being the focus of such attention. The men ate quietly, left a generous tip, and departed without further conversation. But their presence lingered like a promise, or a warning. When my shift ended at 3, I stepped outside to find a sleek black Bentley parked across the street. The back window lowered as I watched, revealing Dante's unmistakable profile. Get in, he called, his voice carrying easily across the distance. I hesitated, aware of Maria watching wide-eyed from inside the diner. I don't recall agreeing to see you again. Yet here I am. There was amusement in his tone, as if my resistance was an entertaining diversion. I thought I'd save you the trouble of calling. That's presumptuous. I prefer optimistic. He pushed open the door. 15 minutes. That's all I ask. 15 minutes. What harm could come from 15 minutes? I crossed the street before I could talk myself out of it, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of expensive cologne and new car. "Your men were in my diner this morning," I said, as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. A driver I hadn't noticed behind the wheel. "Marco and Vincent," Dante confirmed, seemingly unconcerned by my accusatory tone. "They said you make excellent coffee. They were checking up on me. They were ensuring you weren't inconvenienced by our little performance last night." He turned to face me fully, his expression serious. "Did Daniel's sister cause any more trouble?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected denials or evasions, not what sounded like genuine concern. "No," I admitted. "But she definitely sent those photos to him. He texted me at 2 a.m. demanding to know who you were." Something dangerous flashed in Dante's eyes. "And what did you tell him?" "Nothing. I blocked his number." The small act of defiance had been strangely empowering. He lost the right to question my choices when he walked out. Approval warmed Dante's expression. "Good." The car turned onto a tree-lined street in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, where old money mingled with new power behind wrought iron gates and manicured hedges. We pulled into a private drive, stopping before a stunning modern mansion of glass and stone. "This isn't 15 minutes, I protested as Dante opened his door. "Where are we?" "My home." He extended his hand. "And I promise, if you want to leave after 15 minutes, my driver will take you anywhere you wish to go." Curiosity won over caution. I placed my hand in his, allowing him to help me from the car. His touch sent the same electric current through me as it had last night. Unwelcome, yet undeniable. His home was a study in understated luxury. Soaring ceilings, minimalist furnishings in shades of gray and black, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a perfectly landscaped garden. No photos adorned the walls, no personal touches betrayed the man who lived here. It could have been a museum, or a high-end hotel. "You live here alone?" I asked, following him through the foyer. "I value my privacy." He led me to a sunlit kitchen that looked barely used, its gleaming surfaces pristine. "Wine? It's 4 in the afternoon. Is that a no?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "Why not? I'm apparently making all sorts of questionable decisions today." A smile played at the corners of his mouth as he selected a bottle from a built-in wine cooler. "I wouldn't call having a drink with me questionable. Unwise, perhaps, but not questionable. Is there a difference?" "Intent." He poured 2 glasses of deep red wine. "Questionable implies uncertainty about motives. I've been very clear about mine. Have you?" I accepted the glass he offered, because from where I'm standing, you've been anything but clear. You pretended to be my husband, had your men track me down, and now I'm standing in your kitchen drinking wine worth more than my weekly rent. What exactly are your intentions, Mr. Russo? He leaned against the counter, studying me with those penetrating eyes that seemed to strip away pretense. "I want to know you, Ellie Sullivan. The real you, not the woman playing small to avoid more heartbreak." His directness was disarming. "You don't know anything about me. I know more than you think." He took a deliberate sip of his wine. 27 years old, graduated with honors in literature but working as a waitress. No living parents, one failed engagement to a man who didn't deserve you, and eyes that light up when you're challenged, like they're doing right now. Cold fear washed through me. "You investigated me." "Of course I did." He said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I don't invite strangers into my home." Normal people get to know each other through conversation, not background checks. I've never claimed to be normal. His gaze never wavered. "Does it bother you that I wanted to know who you were before pursuing you?" "So you are pursuing me." I latched onto the admission, trying to regain some control of the conversation. "Was that ever in doubt?" He moved closer, his presence filling the space between us. "I wanted you the moment I saw you sitting alone at that table, trying so hard to look unbroken." His honesty stripped me of defenses. No man had ever looked at me the way Dante did, as if I were a puzzle he was determined to solve, a treasure to be claimed. "I'm not what you think I am," I said softly. "I'm not mysterious or special. I'm just getting by." "That's where you're wrong." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with unexpected tenderness. "Most people are content to merely exist, Ellie. But you, there's fire beneath that careful exterior." I saw it when you stood up to that woman, when you let me kiss you despite her. You're not just getting by. You're waiting to truly live." His words resonated in places I'd thought long dormant. Before Daniel, I'd had dreams. Of writing, of traveling, of experiencing life instead of just observing it. Somewhere along the way, those dreams had been carefully packed away, replaced by more practical considerations. "And you think you're the one to help me live?" I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. "I think I'm the one who sees you," he replied simply. "The question is whether you're brave enough to be seen." The challenge hung between us, charged with possibility. 15 minutes had long since passed, yet I made no move to leave. Something about Dante Russo pulled at me, a gravitational force I couldn't explain or resist. "Have dinner with me," he said again. But this time it was different, not a command but a request. Almost vulnerable in its simplicity, I should have said no, should have handed back the wine glass, thanked him for the ride, and walked away from the intoxicating danger he represented. Instead, I heard myself say, "Okay." His smile transformed his face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek that softened his severe features. "Tomorrow night? I'll send a car. I can drive myself," I insisted, needing to maintain some independence. "Of course." He didn't argue, which surprised me. 8 o'clock. I'll text you the address." As if on cue, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to find a message from an unknown number. "Looking forward to tomorrow." "How did you get my number?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The same way I found your workplace." He wasn't apologetic. "I'm a thorough man, Ellie. It served me well." The reminder of who he was, what he was, sent a sobering chill through me. "These connections of yours, they're not entirely legitimate, are they?" His expression hardened slightly. "Would my answer change your mind about dinner?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. He seemed to appreciate that, nodding slowly. "Let's just say I operate in gray areas. But I have lines I don't cross, principles I don't compromise. Does that satisfy your curiosity?" It didn't, not really, but I recognized it was all I would get for now. For the moment. "Good." He took my wine glass, setting it aside. "Now, I believe I promised you could leave after 15 minutes. It's been..." He checked his watch. 43. "Are you kicking me out?" I asked, oddly disappointed. "On the contrary." His voice lowered, sending a shiver down my spine. "I'm honoring my word, even though what I really want is to keep you here all night." The naked desire in his eyes made my breath catch. No one had ever wanted me with such intensity, such focused intent. It was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. "I should go," I managed, though my body screamed otherwise. "My driver is waiting." He walked me to the door, his hand at the small of my back, a gentleman despite the predatory gleam in his eyes. "Until tomorrow, Ellie." Outside, the Bentley idled in the circular drive. As promised, Dante's driver took me directly home, to the small apartment that now seemed shabby and colorless after the opulence of his world. That night, as I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed again. "Dream of me." 2 simple words that followed me into sleep, where dark eyes and strong hands awaited. Monday dawned bright and clear, bringing with it a surge of nervous energy I hadn't felt in months. I spent too long choosing what to wear for work, discarded 3 outfits before settling on a simple blue dress I'd owned for years. It was ridiculous to care what I looked like at the diner, where the uniform apron would cover me anyway. But I couldn't help myself. Maria noticed immediately. Well, someone's looking pretty today." "Hot date?" "Just felt like making an effort," I lied, avoiding her knowing gaze. "Wouldn't have anything to do with those suits from yesterday, would it? Or the fancy car you got into?" I froze. "You were watching me?" "Honey, the whole diner was watching you. Not every day we see Ellie Sullivan getting into a Bentley with a man who looks like he owns half the city." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Is that who I think it is? Dante Russo?" The name on her lips sent a jolt through me. "You know him?" "Know of him. Everyone does." Her expression grew serious. "Be careful, Ellie. Men like that, they don't play by the same rules as the rest of us." "It's just dinner," I said defensively. Sure it is. She patted my arm. Just remember who you're dealing with. As if I could forget. Throughout my shift, I found myself watching the door, half expecting to see Marco and Vincent walk in again. They didn't. But the anticipation never quite left me. By 7, I was home and standing before my closet, faced with the reality that nothing I owned was appropriate for whatever restaurant Dante would choose. I settled finally on a black dress, simple but elegant, the most expensive thing I owned. I'd bought it for job interviews after graduation, before settling for waitressing when my literary ambitions yielded nothing but rejection letters. At 7:55, I was applying a final touch of lipstick when my phone buzzed. The address Dante sent was to Argento, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the city, where reservations were reportedly booked months in advance. I arrived at 8:10, fashionably late, and fighting nerves that threatened to send me running back to my car. The maitre d' recognized Dante's name immediately, escorting me to a private dining room where candlelight cast soft shadows across white linens and crystal glasses. Dante rose as I entered, his eyes darkening appreciatively as they took in my appearance. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, the fabric clearly custom and expensive. "You're stunning," he said simply, pulling out my chair. "Thank you." I settled nervously, hyper-aware of his presence as he reclaimed his seat across from me. "This place is incredible. The chef is an old friend." He signaled to a waiting server who immediately poured wine into our glasses. I took the liberty of ordering for us traditional Italian dishes from my grandmother's recipes. "I hope you don't mind." The presumption would have annoyed me from anyone else, but from him, it felt like care rather than control. "Not at all." "Tell me something," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Why literature? What drew you to it?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected small talk, not immediate interest in my passions. "Words have power," I answered finally. "They can create worlds, change minds, make you feel less alone. I always wanted to be part of that, to write something that mattered. And what stopped you?" The blunt question pierced a tender spot. "Reality," I said with a bitter smile. "Turns out publishers aren't exactly fighting over unknown writers with nothing but student debt and big dreams." "So you gave up?" "I adapted," I corrected, stung by his assessment. "Bills don't pay themselves with manuscript pages." "And Daniel? Did he support your writing?" My silence was answer enough. I thought not. Dante's jaw tightened. Men who truly love don't stifle passion. They fuel it. The intensity in Dante's voice made me look up sharply. There was genuine anger there, as if Daniel's lack of support for my writing was a personal affront. "You speak as if you know me," I said, both unsettled and intrigued by his perception. "As if you understand what I need." "Perhaps I do." His eyes never left mine, dark and knowing. "We recognize in others what we ourselves possess: ambition, passion, the desire for more than what life has offered." Our first course arrived, delicate arancini with truffle oil that melted on my tongue. I savored the flavors, using the moment to gather my thoughts. "And what about you?" I asked finally. "What does Dante Russo desire that he doesn't already have?" Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, that I'd turned the conversation toward him. "Genuine connection," he answered after a pause. "In my world, people approach with agendas, masks firmly in place. Authenticity is rare." "Is that why you're pursuing a waitress? For authenticity?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "Or is it the novelty of slumming with someone from the other side of the tracks, rather than taking offense?" Dante laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. "There it is. That fire. No pretense, no careful words to avoid offending the powerful man. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Ellie." His appreciation of my bluntness was disarming. I'd spent years with Daniel carefully moderating my opinions, smoothing rough edges to maintain peace. The freedom to speak my mind without fear of rejection was intoxicating. "You still haven't answered my question," I pressed. "Why me?" Dante studied me, his expression growing serious. "From the moment I saw you sitting alone at that wedding, I recognized something in you, a resilience beneath vulnerability. You were hurt but not broken." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Do you know how rare that is? Most people who've been betrayed either collapse or harden. You've done neither." The main course arrived, osso buco that fell off the bone, served with saffron risotto. We ate in a charged silence, his words settling over me like a caress. "Tell me about your family," I said eventually, needing to shift the focus from myself. A shadow passed over his features. "My parents emigrated from Sicily before I was born. My father started with nothing, a small restaurant in Little Italy that barely kept the lights on. He built it into something greater through sheer force of will. And now you've built it even further," I observed, carefully stepping around the rumors of exactly how he'd expanded the family business. "I've diversified," he acknowledged with a slight smile. "Real estate, hospitality, investments. The legitimate portfolio is quite substantial." The deliberate emphasis on legitimate hung between us, an acknowledgement of the unspoken. "And the other portfolio?" I asked softly, knowing I was venturing into dangerous territory. He set down his fork, wiping his mouth with a napkin before responding. "Ellie, there are aspects of my life that are complicated. I won't insult your intelligence by denying that, but I will ask you to trust that I operate with a code, with boundaries. That's not very reassuring. It's the truth." His gaze was steady, unapologetic. "I can promise you safety. I can promise you honesty within limits. I can promise that my interest in you is genuine and uncomplicated. Beyond that..." He shrugged, the gesture somehow elegant despite its simplicity. It should have been my cue to leave, to thank him for dinner and walk away from the complications he represented. Instead, I found myself nodding slowly. "Honesty within limits," I repeated. "I can understand that." Relief flickered across his face, so briefly I almost missed it. "Good. Now, tell me about this novel you're not writing." The conversation shifted to safer ground. My abandoned manuscript, his surprising knowledge of literary classics, shared opinions on films and music. By the time dessert arrived, I was laughing more freely than I had in months, caught up in the easy flow of conversation, with a man who listened as if my words were precious gifts. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. Dante's driver waited with the Bentley, but Dante made no move toward the car. "Walk with me?" he asked, offering his arm. I hesitated only briefly before linking my arm through his. We strolled along the sidewalk, the city lights creating a private universe around us. From a distance, we might have looked like any couple enjoying an evening together, if not for the discreet security detail I now noticed following at a respectful distance. "Does it ever bother you?" I asked, nodding toward the men. "Having shadows constantly at your heels?" "It's a necessary precaution," he said, his tone matter of fact. "One adapts." "Because of your business interests? Because power creates enemies." He guided me around a corner into a small park, the path lit by ornate lamps. "When you build something substantial, there will always be those who wish to take it from you." That sounds exhausting. It can be. For the first time, I caught a glimpse of weariness beneath his confident exterior. The constant vigilance, the calculation of every move, the awareness that a single mistake could cost everything. "Why continue, then?" I asked. "You must have enough money to walk away, start fresh somewhere." He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. "Would you walk away from something you'd built with blood and sacrifice? Something passed to you by your father, with the expectation that you would not just maintain it, but grow it for the next generation." The passion in his voice stirred something in me. I understood legacy, the weight of expectations. My own father had been a professor of literature, his shelves filled with first editions, and his heart full of dreams that his daughter would someday join their ranks. "No," I admitted softly. "I wouldn't walk away." Dante reached out, his fingers tracing my cheek with unexpected tenderness. "You understand more than you realize, Ellie Sullivan." His touch sent heat spiraling through me, awakening needs I'd tried to bury after Daniel's betrayal. I leaned into his hand almost involuntarily, drawn to his warmth like a moth to flame. "This is happening too fast," I whispered, even as my body swayed toward his. "Is it?" His thumb brushed my lower lip, his eyes following the movement. "Or is it simply happening exactly when it should?" Before I could answer, the sharp ring of his phone shattered the moment. Dante's expression hardened as he checked the screen, immediately stepping back. "I need to take this," he said, his voice suddenly all business. He moved several paces away, speaking in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. The interruption gave me a moment of clarity, a breath of space from the magnetic pull of his presence. What was I doing? Getting involved with Dante Russo was more than just a rebound. It was stepping willingly into a world I couldn't begin to understand, with rules and dangers I wasn't prepared for. When he returned, the intimate mood had dissolved, replaced by a palpable tension in the set of his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice clipped. "Something requires my attention. I'll have my driver take you home. Is everything all right?" I asked, concern overriding my earlier doubts. "Just business." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." The dismissal stung more than it should have. For hours, he'd treated me like an equal, someone worthy of his undivided attention. Now, with a single phone call, I was reminded of the reality. I was a diversion, a temporary escape from his real life. "Of course," I said stiffly, pride straightening my spine. "Thank you for dinner." Dante caught my arm as I turned to leave, his grip firm but not painful. "Ellie," he said, his voice softening, "this isn't a dismissal. If I could stay with you tonight, I would. But this matter—" "You don't owe me explanations," I interrupted. "We had dinner, that's all. It's fine." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Is that what you think this was? Just dinner?" Before I could respond, he pulled me to him, one hand tangling in my hair as his mouth claimed mine with startling intensity. Unlike our staged kiss at the wedding, this was raw and real, a statement of intent that left no room for misinterpretation. I gasped against his lips, my body responding with embarrassing eagerness, hands clutching the lapels of his jacket to steady myself against the onslaught of sensation. When he finally released me, we were both breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine. "That," he said roughly, "was not just dinner, and this isn't over, Ellie. Not by a long shot." The drive home passed in a blur, my mind replaying the kiss, the dinner, every word exchanged. I could still feel the pressure of Dante's lips, the strength in his hands, the heat that had flared between us. My apartment felt smaller than ever as I kicked off my heels, the transition from his world to mine jarring in its starkness. I moved through my evening routine mechanically, trying to process the evening's events. A text arrived as I was preparing for bed. "I apologize for the abrupt ending. Tomorrow night. My place. 7 p.m. Please say yes." I stared at the message, knowing I stood at a crossroads. Forward into unknown territory with a man who represented everything I should avoid, or backward into the safety of my carefully controlled existence? "Yes," I typed, hitting send before I could reconsider. Sleep came fitfully, dreams filled with shadows and whispered Italian that I couldn't understand. The next day at work dragged endlessly, each minute ticking by with excruciating slowness. Maria watched me with knowing eyes, but mercifully asked no questions about my date. I moved through my shifts like a sleepwalker, mind elsewhere, counting hours until 7. When I arrived at Dante's mansion, the gates opened automatically, as if he'd been watching for me. Instead of the formal foyer where we'd met before, this time a housekeeper led me through to a more intimate space, a library with walls of books stretching to the ceiling, leather chairs arranged before a fireplace where flames danced over seasoned logs. Dante stood before one of the bookshelves, examining a volume bound in aged leather. He wore casual clothes, dark jeans, and a gray cashmere sweater that clung to his broad shoulders. The sight of him dressed down made my heart stutter inexplicably. "You came," he said, setting the book aside and crossing to where I stood. I said I would. I tried for nonchalance despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. He smiled, the expression warming his severe features. "So you did. Can I get you a drink? Wine would be nice." As he poured from a decanter, I wandered the room, trailing fingers along book spines. "These are first editions," I noted with surprise, recognizing several valuable classics. "You have a good eye." He handed me a glass. "My father collected them. I've continued the tradition, a crime lord with a taste for literature." I mused, immediately regretting the words. "I'm sorry, that was accurate, if reductive." He didn't seem offended, though I prefer businessman with diverse interests. The tension broke, and I found myself smiling. Of course, much more diplomatic. Come. He guided me to a sofa near the fire. I've had dinner prepared. Nothing fancy, just pasta made by my housekeeper. She's from my father's village and refuses to let anyone else touch her kitchen. The normalcy of it, a home-cooked meal by the fire, was startlingly intimate, more so than the expensive restaurant had been. Last night, I began, needing to address what had been left unresolved. Your phone call. A situation at one of my clubs, he explained, settling beside me. Nothing serious, but requiring immediate attention. He was lying. I could see it in the careful neutrality of his expression, the slight tightening around his eyes. Whatever had called him away had been significant, perhaps even dangerous. Dante, I said quietly, if we're going to, whatever this is, I need honesty, even within those limits you mentioned. He studied me for a long moment, weighing something in his mind. There was an incident with a rival organization, he finally said. A territorial dispute that needed to be handled personally. Handled how? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His expression hardened. That falls outside the limits, Ellie. The reminder of who he was, what he was capable of, sent a chill through me. Yet instead of pushing me away, it only heightened my awareness of him, of the controlled power that hummed beneath his composed exterior. I understand, I said, and found that I did. There were parts of his life I would never be privy to, doors that would remain closed to me. The question was whether I could accept that partial access, that deliberate compartmentalization. Relief softened his features. Thank you. Dinner was served in the library, simple but exquisite pasta with a sauce that tasted of sunlight and distant shores. We ate on the coffee table, the informality a stark contrast to the previous night's fine dining. Tell me about your writing, Dante said as we finished, refilling our wine glasses. What did you want to say that the world needed to hear? No one had asked me that before, not my professors, not my friends, certainly not Daniel. The question pierced me, exposing a dream I'd carefully packed away. I wanted to write about resilience, I said slowly, about people who bend but don't break under pressure, who find strength in unlikely places. And have you found that strength, Ellie? In yourself? I considered the question, thinking of the past months of rebuilding after Daniel's betrayal. I'm trying, I answered honestly. Some days are better than others. What's stopping you from writing now? I laughed without humor. Reality, bills, the fact that I work double shifts most days and come home too exhausted to string two coherent sentences together. And if those obstacles were removed? Something in his tone made me wary. What are you suggesting? An arrangement. He set down his glass, turning to face me fully. I have a guest house on this property. Private, fully furnished, with a study overlooking the gardens. Stay there. Write your book. No distractions, no financial concerns. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. And in exchange? Time, he said simply. Dinners, conversations, your company when I'm not working. You're asking me to be your mistress. I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. Dante's expression darkened. I'm asking you to be yourself, without the constraints that have held you back, to pursue your passion while exploring whatever this is between us. He leaned closer, his intensity almost tangible. This isn't about buying your affection, Ellie. It's about removing barriers. It's too much. I stood abruptly, needing distance. We barely know each other. Then get to know me. He rose as well, his height making me tilt my head back to hold his gaze. Stay tonight. Not in the guest house. Not as an arrangement. Just stay. Talk to me until dawn if you want. Ask me anything. His offer hung between us, fraught with implications. Staying meant stepping further into his world, acknowledging the pull between us that defied logic or caution. Anything? I asked, a challenge in my voice. Within the limits we discussed, his eyes never left mine, but yes. Anything. I took a deep breath, made my decision. Okay, I'll stay. Relief and something darker flashed across his face. He stepped closer, one hand coming up to cradle my cheek. "You won't regret it." But as his lips claimed mine with a hunger that matched my own, a small voice whispered warnings I chose to ignore. I was falling into Dante Russo's orbit, a willing captive to a gravity I didn't understand and couldn't resist. And deep down, I knew that some falls had no recovery. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, rousing me from the deepest sleep I'd had in months. For a moment, I was disoriented, the silk sheets and massive four-poster bed entirely foreign. Then memories of the night before flooded back. Hours of conversation by the fire, Dante's passionate kisses, his gentleman's insistence on giving me a guest room when desire threatened to overcome caution. "I want you, Ellie," he had murmured against my neck as his hands traced patterns of heat across my skin. "More than I've wanted anyone, but not like this. Not when you're still uncertain. When we cross that line, I want no doubts between us." His restraint had surprised me, challenging my assumptions about him. I had expected demands, not patience. Conquest, not consideration. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I pulled the sheets higher as a uniformed maid entered with a tray. "Good morning, Miss Sullivan," she said, her accent faintly Eastern European. "Mr. Russo asked me to bring you breakfast. He apologizes for his absence. An early meeting required his attention." "Thank you," I managed, taken aback by the formality. The tray held fresh pastries, fruit, and coffee in a delicate china pot that probably cost more than a month of my rent. "Fresh clothes are in the bathroom," she continued. "Mr. Russo thought you might appreciate them, though he said to tell you that your own clothes have been laundered and are in the closet." She departed as efficiently as she'd arrived, leaving me to process this new development. Dante had bought me clothes? The gesture walked a fine line between thoughtful and presumptuous. In the adjoining bathroom, I found brand new items still with tags. Designer jeans, a cashmere sweater in deep blue, delicate undergarments that made me blush. All in my exact size. The thoroughness of his background check suddenly took on new implications. After showering, I hesitated before the clothes. Accepting them felt like a tacit agreement to his arrangement, yet wearing yesterday's outfit seemed petty. Practicality won out. I slipped on the jeans and sweater, admitting to myself how good the expensive fabrics felt against my skin. Breakfast was divine, the coffee rich and complex. I was just finishing when my phone chimed with a text from Dante, regretfully detained. "My driver will take you wherever you wish, unless you'd prefer to stay and explore the property. The library is at your disposal." The offer was tempting. I glanced at the time. My shift didn't start until 4. Hours stretched before me with possibility. "I'll stay for a while," I texted back. His response was immediate. "The West Wing has the best views. Second floor, follow the paintings of Venice." The mansion revealed itself as I wandered, each room more impressive than the last. Modern luxury blended seamlessly with old-world charm. Sleek furnishings alongside Renaissance artwork, cutting-edge technology hidden within classical architecture. Following Dante's directions, I found myself in a sunlit corridor lined with paintings of Venetian canals. At the end stood double doors that opened into what could only be his private study. Unlike the formal, almost impersonal quality of the rest of the house, this room felt lived in. A massive desk dominated one end, papers carefully arranged beside a laptop. Bookshelves held volumes that showed signs of actual use. Cracked spines, bookmarks protruding. A leather couch faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking immaculately landscaped gardens, and beyond, the glittering city skyline. I approached the desk cautiously, feeling like an intruder despite his invitation. Framed photos caught my eye, the only personal touches I'd seen in the entire mansion. Dante as a boy, standing proudly beside an older man with the same strong features. A family gathering, multiple generations around a table laden with food, Dante in graduation robes, flanked by proud parents. These glimpses of normalcy, of humanity, didn't align with the ruthless image cultivated by rumors and media innuendo. I picked up the family photo, studying the faces that had shaped the man who now seemed determined to reshape my life. My father's 70th birthday. I spun around, nearly dropping the frame. Dante stood in the doorway, his suit impeccable, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, replacing the photo. "I didn't mean to pry. You're not prying. I invited you here." He crossed to where I stood, picking up the photo himself. This was 6 months before he died. Heart attack, though he'd survived 3 attempts on his life. A wry smile curved his lips. He always said God had a sense of humor. "You miss him," I observed, seeing the shadow of grief in his eyes. "Every day." He set the photo down carefully. "He built everything I now protect. Taught me the value of family, of honor, of remembering where we came from." He turned to me, his expression softening. "You wore the clothes. I felt heat creep into my cheeks. Thank you for them, but you shouldn't have." "I wanted to." He reached out, fingers brushing my arm. "Blue suits you. Brings out your eyes." The compliment shouldn't have affected me so strongly, but warmth bloomed in my chest nonetheless. "I thought you had meetings, concluded earlier than expected. Fortunate, as I couldn't stop thinking about you." His directness was disarming. "Have you considered my offer?" The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "Dante, I can't just move into your guest house. I have a job, responsibilities. Jobs can be replaced. Opportunities like this cannot." He guided me to the couch, sitting beside me. "What are you afraid of, Ellie?" "Becoming dependent," I admitted. "Losing myself. Waking up one day and realizing I've traded my independence for comfort." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "You think I want to cage you, don't you?" I challenged. "A beautiful bird in a gilded cage singing only for you." He leaned back, studying me. "Is that what you see when you look at me? A collector? A man who imprisons what he desires?" Put that way, it sounded unfair, even cruel. "I don't know what to see," I confessed. "You show me this side of yourself. Thoughtful, patient, interested in my dreams. But there's another side, the one that makes men fear you, that conducts business in shadows. How do I reconcile those 2 versions?" "They're not separate versions, Ellie. They're aspects of the same man." He took my hand, his touch warm and steady. "The world I operate in requires strength, sometimes ruthlessness, but that doesn't diminish my capacity for tenderness with those I care about." "And you care about me?" The question emerged smaller than I intended, vulnerable in its need for reassurance. "More than is wise, perhaps." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "I've built walls around myself for years, kept people at a careful distance. You slipped through somehow. From that first moment at the wedding." His words resonated in places I'd thought closed off after Daniel's betrayal. The possibility of being truly seen, truly wanted, called to something primal within me. "1 month," he said suddenly. "Stay for 1 month. Write your book. Explore this connection between us. If at the end, you want to leave. No obligations, no expectations. And if I say no," his expression remained open, unguarded, "then I'll have my driver take you home, and I'll call you tomorrow to ask you to dinner. This isn't ultimatum, Ellie. It's an invitation." The sincerity in his voice was impossible to dismiss. 1 month. Time to write, to breathe, to discover if the pull I felt toward this complicated man was merely infatuation or something deeper. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Of course." He lifted my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent electricity coursing through me. "Take all the time you need." The drive back to my apartment was a blur of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to run headlong into the adventure Dante offered, the creative freedom, the passion, the intoxicating feeling of being desired so completely. Another part clung to caution, to the independence I'd fought to maintain after finding myself hollowed out by Daniel's departure. My apartment felt particularly shabby after the luxury of Dante's mansion. The dripping faucet I'd been meaning to fix, the second-hand furniture, the stacks of unpaid bills on the counter, all stark reminders of the life I was struggling to maintain. My phone chimed with a text from Maria. "You okay?" "Haven't heard from you since your date." I hesitated, then replied, "I'm fine. Tell you about it at work." Her response was immediate. "Can't wait to hear everything." How could I possibly explain Dante Russo to someone who knew him only as a name, whispered with equal parts fear and fascination? How could I articulate the way he looked at me, as if I were a revelation, a treasure he'd unexpectedly discovered? My shift at the diner passed in a haze of routine motions. Maria cornered me immediately, eyes wide with curiosity. "Spill," she demanded. 2 nights in a row with the mysterious Mr. Russo? Half the waitstaff is taking bets on whether you're secretly engaged or being recruited for some high-end escort service. "Neither," I said firmly, tying my apron. "We had dinner. We talked. It's complicated. Honey, men like that don't do complicated with women like us unless they want something." Her expression softened. "I'm not judging. God knows I'd jump at the chance for a taste of that life. Just be careful, yeah? Don't get your heart broken again." Her concern touched me, even as it highlighted the gulf between my normal life and the extraordinary opportunity Dante was offering. Before I could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and I turned to see a familiar face. Not Dante, but the leaner of his 2 security men, Vincent. He nodded at me, taking a booth by the window. The same one as before. "Your admirer sent another scout?" Maria whispered, eyebrows raised. "Apparently." I grabbed a coffee pot and crossed to his table, oddly relieved to see a familiar face from Dante's world. "Let me guess. Just happened to be in the neighborhood?" Vincent's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Mr. Russo wanted to make sure you got to work safely, and to give you this." He slid a small velvet box across the table. My heart stuttered. "I can't accept—" "It's not what you think," he interrupted gently. "Please." He was quite insistent. Reluctantly, I took the box, opening it with trembling fingers. Inside lay not jewelry, as I'd feared, but an old-fashioned key on a simple silver chain. "To the guest house," Vincent explained. "And a letter." He produced an envelope from his jacket pocket. I tucked both into my apron pocket, aware of curious eyes watching our exchange. "Tell him thank you." Vincent nodded, rising without having ordered anything. "He'll be pleased to hear from you directly." After he left, I continued my shift mechanically, the key a constant presence against my hip, its weight seemingly disproportionate to its size. Only when I took my break did I slip into the employee restroom to read Dante's letter in privacy. The heavy cream paper held a masculine scrawl, decisive and elegant. "Ellie. The key is not a demand, but a standing invitation. The guest house is yours whenever you choose to use it. For an hour, a day, a month, or longer. No strings, no expectations beyond those we create together. I've lived my life surrounded by people who want something from me. My protection, my influence, my resources. With you, I find myself wanting to give without being asked. It's a novel experience, and one I'm eager to explore further. Whatever you decide, know that you've awakened something in me that I thought long dormant. For that alone, I am in your debt. Yours, Dante." I traced the word yours with my fingertip, a curious ache building in my chest. The letter was unexpected, vulnerable in a way I wouldn't have associated with a man of Dante's position and power. When I returned home that night, I found a package leaning against my apartment door. Inside was a sleek laptop with a note that read simply, "For your novel. The world is waiting for your voice." The gesture broke something inside me, a dam of resistance I'd built against hoping too much, wanting too much, believing too much in possibilities that had always seemed just out of reach. I called Dante, my hands shaking slightly as I dialed the number on his business card. He answered on the first ring. "Ellie." Just my name, but the way he said it, like a prayer, like coming home, made my decision crystallize. 1 month, I said without preamble. "No promises beyond that." "No promises," he agreed, though I could hear the smile in his voice. "When?" "Tomorrow." Before I could reconsider, before practical concerns could drown out the voice urging me toward this leap of faith. "After my shift. I'll send a car." "No," I countered, needing to maintain some control. "I'll drive myself. This needs to be my choice, my movement." "As you wish." His tone was warm with understanding. "Until tomorrow, then." That night, I packed essentials into a single suitcase, trying not to think too deeply about what I was doing. I called my landlord and arranged to sublet my apartment for a month. A reasonable precaution, I told myself, not an admission that I might never want to return. My final shift at the diner was a blur of muscle memory and distraction. I told Maria I was taking a month off to focus on writing, staying at a friend's place. The lie tasted bitter, but the truth would have invited questions I wasn't prepared to answer. As I drove through the gates of Dante's estate the following evening, sunset painted the sky in shades of fire and gold. The guest house stood separate from the main mansion, a charming two-story structure of stone and glass that would have been considered a luxury home by any standard. Dante waited on the front steps, casually dressed in jeans and a black button-down, looking more approachable than I'd seen him yet. He made no move to help with my bags, understanding without words that I needed to make this entrance on my terms. "Welcome," he said simply as I approached. "Thank you for the laptop," I replied, suddenly shy in the face of his steady gaze. It was too much, but thank you. "You're welcome." He stepped aside, gesturing to the open door. "Would you like to see inside?" The guest house was perfect, spacious yet intimate, luxurious yet comfortable. Bookshelves lined the living room walls, stocked with classics and contemporary works. The kitchen gleamed with high-end appliances. Upstairs, a master suite offered a bed that rivaled the one in Dante's home. And beside it, as promised, a study with windows overlooking the gardens. A desk sat before those windows, its surface empty, save for a single item. A vintage typewriter, restored to gleaming perfection. "It was my father's," Dante said, watching my reaction. He believed important words deserved to be written with intention, with the physical connection of keys striking paper. I touched the typewriter reverently, moved beyond words by the personal nature of this gift. "Dante, I can't." "You can," he interrupted gently. "It's gathered dust for years." My father would approve of it finding purpose again. The intimacy of the gesture overwhelmed me. I turned to him, words inadequate to express what I was feeling. "I'll leave you to settle in," he said, seeming to understand my need for space. "Dinner is at 7 in the main house if you'd like to join me, or you can eat here, if you prefer solitude tonight." The choice, so simple, yet so profound in its respect for my autonomy, cemented my decision more than any grand gesture could have. 7, I confirmed. "I'll be there," he nodded, moving toward the door. At the threshold, he paused, turning back with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I'm glad you're here, Ellie," he said quietly. "Whatever comes next, remember that this was your choice. Your movement, as you said." As I watched him walk back toward the main house, the last rays of sunset gilding his profile, I wondered if choices could be both entirely free and utterly inevitable, like falling, like surrender, like coming home to a place you'd never been before. 1 month, a lifetime. Perhaps they were the same thing when measured in heartbeats rather than days. Days melted into one another with dreamlike fluidity. Mornings found me at the typewriter, words flowing more freely than they had in years, pages accumulating with satisfying regularity. Afternoons I spent exploring the grounds or reading in the garden, occasionally swimming in the indoor pool that Dante insisted I consider my own. Evenings belonged to Dante. Dinners stretched into long conversations by the fire, his hand gradually finding mine with increasing familiarity. Each night ended with increasingly passionate kisses that tested the boundaries we'd silently established, his restraint both frustrating and endearing. 2 weeks into my stay, I had 100 pages of my manuscript, more than I'd written in the past year. The story poured from me, a tale of a woman finding strength in the aftermath of betrayal, discovering parts of herself long suppressed. "It's you," Dante observed one evening as I described the plot. "Your journey." "Partly," I admitted, though my protagonist makes different choices. His eyes held mine with unsettling perception. "Safer ones? More cautious ones," I corrected. "She doesn't fall for the dangerous man." Something flickered in his expression, vulnerability quickly masked by a teasing smile. "Her loss, I'd say." That night, when he walked me back to the guest house as had become our routine, I made a decision that had been building for days. At the door, I caught his hand as he turned to leave. "Stay," I said simply. His eyes darkened, searching mine for certainty. "Ellie?" I'm sure, I interrupted, knowing his objection before he voiced it. No more waiting. He stepped closer, one hand coming up to cradle my face with a tenderness that contrasted with the barely leashed desire in his gaze. If we do this, there's no going back. Not for me. The implication was clear. This wasn't casual for him, wouldn't be a simple physical release. It would change everything between us, deepen a connection already growing more profound by the day. I know, I whispered, and I did. Whatever this was between us had moved beyond infatuation or rebellion into something far more dangerous, something that felt increasingly like falling in love. His kiss was different this time, possessive, claiming, as if now that I'd opened the door, he intended to walk through it completely. I matched his intensity, weeks of simmering attraction exploding into desperate need. We barely made it upstairs, leaving a trail of discarded clothing in our wake. In the moonlight filtering through sheer curtains, Dante's body was a study in contrasts, brutal strength and unexpected gentleness, scars telling stories of violence alongside touches that spoke of reverence. You're perfect, he murmured against my skin, exploring every inch with methodical devotion. Perfect for me. When he finally claimed me fully, the sensation of completion was overwhelming, not just physical, but emotional, as if pieces long separated had finally aligned. We moved together with increasing urgency, his control finally breaking as he drove us both toward a shattering release that left me trembling in its wake. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, I felt a curious peace. The complications, the dangers, the uncertainty of our future all existed outside this moment of perfect connection. Stay. I echoed his earlier request, suddenly afraid he would leave now that boundaries had fallen. His arms tightened around me. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. In sleep, his face relaxed, years falling away to reveal the young man from the graduation photo, unburdened by the weight of his empire. I traced the lines of his face with a gentle finger, marveling at the trust implied by his vulnerability. The ringing of his phone shattered our cocoon of intimacy. Dante woke instantly, reaching for it with the alertness of a man accustomed to midnight emergencies. What? He answered, voice sharp with annoyance. As he listened, his expression darkened, body tensing beside mine. When? How many? Secure the location. No one enters or leaves. I'm on my way. He ended the call, already moving to collect his scattered clothes. I have to go, he said, voice tight with controlled fury. There's been an incident at one of my warehouses. What kind of incident? I asked, pulling the sheet around me, suddenly cold despite the warm night. He hesitated, clearly weighing what to tell me. A break-in, possibly an attempted robbery. The careful phrasing told me there was more, much more, that he wasn't saying. I sat up, studying him as he dressed with efficient movements. Will you come back tonight? I asked, hating the neediness in my voice but unable to suppress it. His expression softened as he leaned down to kiss me. As soon as I can. Lock the doors behind me. The instruction was sobering, a reminder that his world contained threats from which even this sanctuary wasn't entirely immune. I watched from the window as he drove away, 2 security vehicles flanking his Bentley. The estate suddenly felt vast and empty, despite the guards I knew patrolled its perimeter. Sleep eluded me after Dante's departure. I tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I paced the guest house, replaying the night's events, both the ecstasy before the phone call and the stark reminder of reality after. By dawn, Dante still hadn't returned. I made coffee, trying to ignore the gnawing worry in my gut. This was his life. Midnight emergencies, business that couldn't wait, dangers I could only imagine. If I chose him, I chose this too. The uncertainty, the absences, the knowledge that parts of his world would remain forever closed to me. My phone buzzed with a text. All handled. Will explain tonight. Rest, Tesoro. Relief flooded me, followed quickly by a wave of realization. In just 2 weeks, I had become invested in this man, worried for his safety, aching for his presence. It had happened so quickly, this shift from cautious exploration to emotional entanglement. The day passed slowly. I forced myself to write, to maintain the routine I'd established. But my thoughts kept drifting to Dante. What had happened at the warehouse? Who would dare move against him? And what consequences would they face? Evening brought no sign of him. I texted, receiving only a brief reply. Still handling matters. Might be late. Don't wait up. Disappointment warred with understanding. This was the reality I'd need to accept if I stayed beyond my promised month. A man whose responsibilities would always compete with his affections. I was about to retire for the night when a knock at the door startled me. Expecting Dante, I hurried to answer, only to find Vincent instead, his expression grave. "Miss Sullivan," he said formally. "Mr. Russo asked me to escort you to the main house immediately." Alarm shot through me. "Is he all right?" "He's unharmed," Vincent assured me, though something in his tone suggested all was not well. "Please, he's waiting." The walk to the mansion felt longer than usual, dread building with each step. Vincent led me not to the library or dining room where Dante and I usually spent our evenings, but to a part of the house I hadn't yet seen. A wing that seemed older, more formal. He opened a heavy wooden door, revealing what could only be described as a war room. A large table dominated the center, surrounded by men in various states of tension. Maps and documents covered the surface, alongside several laptops displaying security footage. Dante stood at the head of the table, still in the clothes from last night, shadows of exhaustion beneath his eyes. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Vincent," he said, dismissing the security man with a nod. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this discussion later. Leave us." The assembled men filed out, several casting curious glances my way. When the door closed behind the last of them, Dante crossed to me, taking my hands in his. "I'm sorry to bring you here like this," he said, his voice rough with fatigue, "but we need to talk, and it couldn't wait." Fear coiled in my stomach. What's happened? He guided me to a chair, taking the one beside it rather than returning to his position of authority at the table's head. Last night wasn't just a break-in. It was a coordinated attack. 3 of my properties hit simultaneously. Professional job, minimal casualties. The casual mention of casualties, however minimal, sent a chill through me. This wasn't a business dispute or corporate espionage. This was violence, potentially death. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because the timing wasn't coincidental." His eyes held mine, intense and worried. "They knew I would be distracted. They knew about you." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "Me? But how would anyone? We've been seen together in public." "Someone's been watching, gathering intelligence." His hands tightened around mine. "I've made enemies, Ellie, powerful ones. I've always known they might target those close to me, which is why I've kept people at a distance. But you, I'm a vulnerability." I finished for him, the realization both terrifying and oddly validating, proof that what we shared was real enough to be used against him. Yes. No sugarcoating, no reassurances that I was imagining the danger, which is why I need to move you. "Move me where?" "I have a property in Switzerland, remote, heavily secured. You'd be safe there until this situation is resolved." Switzerland. A world away, isolated from everything familiar. For how long? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. This wasn't a temporary precaution, but a fundamental change. A life in hiding, separated from the man I was rapidly falling for, except when he could safely visit. So this is it? I pulled my hands from his, anger rising to combat fear. 2 weeks of happiness and then exile? Ship me off to some distant chalet while you fight your wars? It's not exile, Ellie. It's protection. Frustration edged his voice. "Do you think I want this? That I want you thousands of miles away when all I can think about is being with you? Then find another way." I stood, unable to remain still with emotions churning inside me. "I won't live in a gilded cage, Dante, no matter how beautiful the view." He rose as well, his height intimidating despite the gentleness with which he'd always treated me. "This isn't negotiable. Your safety isn't something I'm willing to compromise on." The finality in his tone struck a nerve. The same control Daniel had exercised in subtler ways, making decisions for my own good without consulting me. "My safety is my choice," I said, voice shaking with the effort to remain calm. My life is my choice. You don't get to decide for me, no matter how dangerous your world is. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Then help me understand. Include me in finding solutions instead of dictating terms. I moved closer, refusing to be intimidated. I chose you with my eyes open, Dante. I knew who you were. Did you? He laughed without humor. You knew the sanitized version I showed you. The man who took you to dinner and bought you pretty things and listened to your dreams. Not the man who had to identify bodies this morning because they got caught in crossfire meant for me. His words hit like a slap, reality intruding brutally into the romantic bubble we'd created. He was right. I had accepted the idea of his darker business in abstract, without confronting its bloody consequences. Then tell me now, I said quietly. Show me the truth, all of it, and let me decide if it's a price I'm willing to pay to be with you. Dante studied me for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression. Then, with a resigned sigh, he reached for a folder on the table, handing it to me. The Moretti family, he said, as I opened it to find surveillance photos of several men. They control territories to the north. We've maintained an uneasy peace for years, but Giovanni's son recently took over operations. Paolo is young, ambitious, eager to prove himself. By coming after you, I surmised. By taking what he perceives as mine. Dante's jaw tightened. Territory, businesses, people. I flipped through more photos, stopping at one that made my blood freeze. Myself, walking into the diner, clearly taken with a telephoto lens. They've been watching me. For at least a week. Dante took the photo, his knuckles white with restrained fury. I should have been more careful, should have anticipated this. The reality of the danger sank in fully. This wasn't theoretical anymore. Men with guns and grudges knew who I was, saw me as Dante's weakness. Yet the thought of running, of hiding in Switzerland while he faced this threat alone, was equally unpalatable. There has to be another option, I insisted. Something between exile and pretending there's no threat. Dante ran a hand through his hair. A rare gesture of frustration, such as negotiation, compromise, whatever businessmen do when interests conflict. This isn't a boardroom disagreement, Ellie. Paolo wants blood, specifically mine. He sees taking over my territories as his birthright, believes his father was too soft. Then change the equation, I suggested, an idea forming. If he's using me to get to you, remove me as a factor without sending me away. Dante's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? A public breakup. Make it seem like whatever was between us is over, that I mean nothing to you now. The words hurt to speak, even as a strategy. I return to my apartment, my job, my normal life. To Paolo, I become irrelevant, no longer a pressure point, while secretly we continue, Dante said slowly, considering the strategy. It could work, temporarily. But it would mean limiting our time together, maintaining the deception constantly. Isn't that better than being continents apart? I moved closer, taking his hands. I'd rather have stolen moments with you than safety without you. His expression softened, one hand coming up to cradle my face. You continue to surprise me, Ellie Sullivan. Most women would run screaming from this situation. I'm not most women. I leaned into his touch, and whatever this is between us, it's worth fighting for. He pulled me into his arms, holding me as if I might vanish if he loosened his grip. I never expected you, he murmured against my hair. Never thought I'd find someone who could see all of me and still choose to stay. I'm staying, I promised. Though fear still coiled in my stomach at the reality we faced. We'll find a way through this together. The following week was a carefully orchestrated performance. I returned to my apartment, resumed my shifts at the diner. Dante and I argued loudly in public places, ensuring gossip would spread. For the final act, I threw a drink in his face at an upscale restaurant where Paolo Moretti's associates were known to dine, storming out with tears streaming convincingly down my face. In private, we met in secret locations, using Vincent as our intermediary. The stolen hours were more precious for their rarity, our connection deepening despite, or perhaps because of, the obstacles we faced. Meanwhile, Dante worked tirelessly to neutralize the threat. Not through violence, as I'd initially feared, but through a complex web of alliances and strategic concessions. He offered Paolo recognition and respect, along with mutually beneficial business arrangements, while simultaneously strengthening his position through new alliances with other families. 2 months after our staged breakup, Paolo Moretti accepted Dante's invitation to a formal sit-down, a peace summit of sorts, mediated by an elder statesman of the underworld whom both men respected. I paced my apartment the entire day, waiting for news, jumping at every sound. When my door finally opened, revealing Dante with exhaustion but satisfaction written across his features, I knew without words that he had succeeded. "It's done," he confirmed, gathering me into his arms. "Paolo has accepted my terms. The war is over before it truly began." "What did it cost you?" I asked against his chest, knowing there must have been a price. "Some territory I can afford to lose. Exclusive rights to a shipping route I rarely used." He pulled back to look at me, a smile playing at his lips. "And a promise that my future wife will be formally introduced to all allied families, with the full protection such status conveys." My heart stuttered. Future wife? Dante reached into his pocket, producing a ring that caught the light, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, elegant and understated despite its obvious value. "I had planned something more romantic," he said, suddenly looking uncertain. "A proper proposal, not this rushed moment after months of subterfuge, but I find I can't wait any longer." He took my hand, his eyes never leaving mine. "Marry me, Ellie. Be my partner in all things, the light to balance my darkness, the peace at the center of my storms." Tears blurred my vision as conflicting emotions warred within me: joy, fear, love, uncertainty. This man had upended my life, shown me passion and danger in equal measure, challenged me to be more than I'd believed possible. "Your world is still dangerous," I said, needing to be certain we both understood the reality. "This peace may not last forever." "No peace ever does," he acknowledged. "But we'll face whatever comes together. No more secrets, no more separation. A true partnership." The promise of honesty, of inclusion rather than protection, sealed my decision. "Yes," I whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, I'll marry you." As he slid the ring onto my finger, I knew our path would never be easy. Dante's world would always contain elements of danger, of moral compromise, of hard choices, but it would also contain love, passion, and a man who saw me completely, my strength and vulnerability, my dreams and fears, and chose me anyway. 6 months later, we stood together in the garden of Dante's estate, now our home, exchanging vows before a carefully curated guest list of family and trusted allies. My manuscript, completed and accepted by a publisher who had responded enthusiastically to my tale of transformation and resilience, sat bound in leather on a table with the gifts. As Dante leaned in to seal our union with a kiss, he whispered against my lips, "Thank you for pretending to be my wife that night. And thank you more for choosing to be my wife today." In that moment, I knew that what had begun as a reckless pretense had transformed into the most authentic choice of my life. The Mafia boss and the waitress. The powerful and the vulnerable. Two people who had recognized in each other not just desire, but the possibility of becoming more together than they ever could apart. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better. A real beginning, eyes wide open, walking willingly into a future we would forge together, one day at a time.